August 21, 1942. Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The jungle breathes heat and tension. Private Hiroshi Takeda wipes the sweat from his brow, crouching beneath tangled vines as the distant hum of engines echoes from the coast. He squints through the leaves and laughs. "Look at that," he mutters in disbelief to the man beside him. "America sends toys to war." Emerging from the tree line are squat, stubby tanks, the M3 Stuarts, their riveted armor glinting weakly under the Pacific sun. Compared to Japan's own Type 97 Chiha, they look like metal boxes on bicycle tracks. When one of the Stuarts rumbles over a small log and nearly stalls, the laughter spreads among the Imperial troops. "Useless," another soldier shouts. "They'll burn before they reach the hill." And in that moment, they believed it. The Japanese infantry, veterans of Manchuria and China, had learned to fear few things. Their officers told them that America's soldiers were soft, its machines fragile. When they saw those light tanks, thinly armored, armed with small 37mm guns, they assumed the jungle would swallow them whole. For a time, they were right. At the Battle of the Tenaru, and later at Matanikau, U.S. Marine tanks bogged down in rivers, overheated, and struggled against Japanese anti-tank teams. Sticky bombs, grenades, and sheer courage brought them down. American armor, it seemed, had no place in the Pacific's thick mud and coral. But back at Henderson Field, officers of the 1st Marine Tank Battalion were learning. Mechanics stripped, repaired, and rebuilt the machines nightly. Pilots flew reconnaissance to spot Japanese ambush lines. Slowly, painfully, the Marines learned how to fight tanks in a jungle, with infantry coordination, naval gunfire, and supply chains that worked. Takeda didn't know it yet. But the next time he faced an American tank, it wouldn't be a toy. It would be the M4 Sherman, a machine that would rewrite the rules of the Pacific War. November 20th, 1943. Baitio Island, Tarawa Atoll. The sky burns orange from naval bombardment. Palm trees have been reduced to blackened stumps, their trunks jutting from the sand like shattered spears. At dawn, the lagoon begins to churn. Landing craft grinding forward, Marines shouting over the roar of engines and the hiss of surf. And behind them, for the first time in this corner of the Pacific, the new machine makes its debut, the M4A2 Sherman. 24 Shermans of Company C, 2nd Marine Tank Battalion, are lashed to landing craft. Their diesel engines rumble as waves slap against their hulls. Inside one tank, China Gal, Sergeant Frank Red Harris tightens his harness, his hand resting on the main gun's britch. "Remember," he yells to his crew through the intercom, "short bursts, keep your eyes on those bunkers." When the ramps drop, chaos explodes. Japanese Type 96 machine guns rake the water, cutting down Marines before they can reach the beach. Mortars howl through the air. Some of the first Shermans sink instantly, swallowed by coral reefs and deep water. Men trapped inside pound the hatches as water floods in. But then, one tank makes it. Colorado crashes onto the sand, treads screeching, water pouring off its hull. Its 75mm gun swivels toward a Japanese pillbox. One shell, boom, turns the concrete into flying dust and fire. The Japanese defenders, hidden in trenches and bunkers, open fire with everything they have. Type 1 anti-tank rifles, satchel charges, and knee mortars. The rounds bounce harmlessly off the Sherman's thick, sloped armor. "Hit it again!" yells Corporal Saito from his bunker, as his team's shells spark and glance off. The disbelief spreads like wildfire. The tank doesn't stop. It doesn't even slow down. For the first time, Japanese infantry watch an American tank shrug off their weapons and crush defenses that had resisted 2 days of naval bombardment. From inside, Sergeant Harris feels the impact of rounds hammering the hull, a dull, rhythmic drumming like hail on a tin roof. His loader, Private Ellis, grins. "They can't touch us," he says, sliding another shell into the breach. By sunset, Betio is littered with wreckage, burned-out pillboxes, shattered guns, and smoking Japanese tanks melted by the Sherman's 75mm shells. Only a few of the Marines' Shermans survive, but the lesson is clear. Once America could land its armor, nothing short of artillery could stop it. In Tokyo, reports of invulnerable new American tanks reach the Imperial General Staff. Some dismiss them as exaggeration. Others grow uneasy. The phrase "Iron Monster" begins to appear in field dispatches. The joke that began at Guadalcanal is over. June 16, 1944. Saipan, Mariana Islands. The first thing the Japanese defenders hear is the thunder. Not the sea, not artillery, but something mechanical, deep, rhythmic, and relentless, rolling across the shattered coral plain. Private Kenji Matsumoto peers over the edge of a trench, clutching his Arisaka rifle. The morning haze trembles as a column of American armor advances through the smoke, the unmistakable silhouette of M4 Shermans grinding over fallen palm trees and wrecked vehicles. "Teiki Senshada!" he cries. "Enemy tanks!" The men of the 136th Infantry Regiment scramble into position. Type 1 anti-tank guns are wheeled forward, their crews sweating and shouting. A shell slams into the lead Sherman. Sparks flash, paint peels, but the tank keeps coming. The second shot hits the turret ring. Nothing. Then a third. Still, the Sherman's 75mm gun fires back, the explosion erasing the gun crew in a cloud of dirt and screams. Inside one tank, Lieutenant Walter K. McCall of the 2nd Marine Division feels each impact like a hammer blow on steel. "They're trying to crack us open," he mutters through the radio, "but they can't get through the hide." The hide, the Sherman's cast hull, had been thickened, sloped, and improved since the early models. Its armor could shrug off the standard Japanese 37mm and 47mm shells that once shredded the light M3s on Guadalcanal. And more importantly, the Shermans could now move, supported by Navy Seabees who bulldozed paths and by new LSTS that ferried tanks directly onto the shore. Every lesson learned on Tarawa is now visible in motion. The Shermans fight in platoons, leapfrogging one another, infantry riding their decks. Radios keep them linked to artillery and air support. When Japanese soldiers emerge with satchel charges, machine guns cut them down before they can reach the tracks. By afternoon, the tanks are driving straight through sugarcane fields, through burning villages, through terrain the Japanese had sworn was impassable for mechanized warfare. As night falls, Lieutenant McCall's crew bivouacs near the ruins of a schoolhouse. His gunner, Private First Class Morgan, lights a cigarette and stares into the darkness. "They called these things toys," he says quietly. "Feels like we're the monsters now." Miles away, General Yoshitsugu Saito receives word from his forward lines. The dispatch is brief, almost disbelieving. The enemy tanks do not die when hit. They advance even through flames. The psychological tide has turned. What the Japanese once mocked as fragile is now the unstoppable face of American power, a mobile fortress backed by a machine that never runs out of men, fuel, or steel. And the nightmare is only beginning. January 1945. Luzon, the Philippines. Rain hammers the jungle canopy. The sound of engines, heavy, mechanical, relentless, rolls like thunder down the mountain roads toward the Lingayen Plain. For Sergeant Noboru Iwata, commanding a small anti-tank detachment of the 2nd Tank Division, the sound feels like fate approaching. His men have dug in around a narrow pass, their 2 Type 1 47mm guns camouflaged behind bamboo screens. Beside him, Corporal Endo clutches a single-shaped charge mine, their last resort. Iwata lifts his binoculars. Through the sheets of rain, dark shapes emerge, M4 Shermans advancing in a long column, their white stars barely visible under the mud. Each one roars forward, water streaming down the glacis plates, exhaust belching black smoke. "Wait until they're close," Iwata whispers. 50 meters. The first shell fires. A flash, a hit. Smoke blooms on a Sherman side, but the tank doesn't stop. It turns its turret calmly, almost lazily, and answers with a 75mm shell that erases the Japanese gun crew in an instant. Iwata feels the ground tremble as more tanks roll through the gap, infantry swarming behind them. The earth itself seems to move, a tide of armor and men that no courage can stop. He ducks as machine gun fire rips through the trees. Endo, clutching his charge, sprints toward the nearest tank, shouting, "Tenno Heika Banzai!" But a burst from the Sherman's coaxial gun cuts him down before he can reach the tracks. Iwata stares as the Sherman passes. Its treads grind Endo's body into the mud. The Japanese sergeant's hands shake. He lowers his rifle. The war, he realizes, has changed beyond human scale. By this stage of the Pacific campaign, the M4 Sherman had become the face of an industrial juggernaut. Over 49,000 units rolled off American assembly lines. Variants, armed with flamethrowers, bulldozer blades, and rockets, adapted to every terrain. On Luzon, the 13th Armored Regiment supported the 37th Infantry Division with such speed that Japanese commanders were forced to fight in isolation, cut off from supplies. American engineers rebuilt roads overnight, bridging rivers that the Japanese had mined and destroyed. Even when Shermans were hit, new ones arrived the next morning. The Japanese defenders, already short of fuel and ammunition, watched the endless convoy of tanks and trucks and began to understand what Germany's generals had already learned in Europe. You cannot defeat a nation that can replace everything overnight. In Manila, the battle becomes a slow-motion apocalypse. Sherman tanks fire point-blank into fortified buildings. The city burns, block by block. Japanese anti-tank teams die by the dozens trying to stop them. And in a diary later found among the ruins, a Japanese lieutenant wrote one final line before his death: "The Americans fight with machines, not men. We fight with our hearts. And our hearts are breaking." The laughter that began on Guadalcanal has fallen silent. February 19th, 1945. Iwo Jima, Volcano Islands. The sea is black with ships. Over 800 vessels crowd the horizon. Destroyers, transports, carriers, and landing craft, all aimed at a speck of volcanic rock barely 8 square miles wide. The island is shaking under constant bombardment, but underground, the Japanese are waiting. Captain Shigemi Saito of the 145th Regiment peers through a periscope slit in his bunker, carved deep into Mount Suribachi's basalt core. His men have been underground for weeks. He hasn't seen the sun in days. But now, through drifting smoke, he sees them. Tanks. U.S. Marines in olive drab surge across the ash, flanked by the lumbering forms of M4 Shermans. Some are standard 75mm armed models, others are specialized. Flamethrower variants called Ronsons or Zippos, after the cigarette lighters they resemble. The Shermans crawl up the slopes, their treads churning the black sand like liquid night. Japanese anti-tank teams lie in wait, clutching magnetic mines and satchel charges. "Let them get close," Saito whispers. When the lead Sherman reaches the edge of a crater, a soldier leaps from a foxhole, mine in hand, and vanishes in a column of fire. The tank's flamethrower erupts, pouring liquid napalm across the trench line. The smell of burning fuel mixes with scorched flesh. The screams echo down the tunnel network. Inside the tank, the crew can hear none of it, only the roar of the engine and the hiss of the flamethrower. Sergeant Robert Jenkins wipes soot from the vision slit, his voice steady. "Keep moving. Don't stop for anything." The Japanese counterattack that night is desperate. Infantry charge through fire and shrapnel, their cries swallowed by the storm of gunfire. One Sherman is hit by a hidden 47mm gun. The shell punches through the side, killing 2 crewmen. But before the gun can reload, another tank swivels and blasts the bunker apart. By dawn, the Shermans have burned paths through the Japanese defenses, paving the way for infantry to advance. Mount Suribachi falls within days. The famous flag goes up, and the Imperial defenders, what remains of them, know the truth. The toy tanks that had once been a subject of laughter are now nightmares in steel. They are symbols of a war that has become industrial, methodical, and merciless. The Shermans aren't the most powerful tanks in the world, not even close, but they are everywhere, always repaired, always returning. In the end, it isn't fear of one tank that breaks the Japanese army's will. It's the realization that America can land hundreds of them on any island it wants, rebuild them faster than they can be destroyed, and feed them an endless stream of fuel, shells, and spare parts from factories 7,000 miles away. That is the moment the myth of Japanese invincibility dies. Not in the air, not at sea, but in the black volcanic soil of Iwo Jima, under the treads of an M4 Sherman. The laughter that started on Guadalcanal is now an echo buried beneath the ash.